Test match number 1 is in the books. I don't know why I'm yelling. The first test match between England and the All Blacks has taken place. Now the second match is nearly here at Eden Park, where the All Blacks are unbeaten for 48 games straight. This is going to be a massive opportunity for England to make some history on New Zealand soil. Last game only decided by 1 point. The question is, with very similar sides, who will take out match number 2? In this preview, we'll be looking through at the lineups, which of course, like I said, not many changes have been made. We'll be looking through at what happened last week in terms of some of the top performers, and then a prediction for this week of who we think will get the victory. But we will start with the All Blacks. Very similar to what they had in the first test match up against England. Only change is at halfback. That was due to the injury of TJ Perenara. Instead, Finlay Christie does come in as the number 9, but looking through at the forward pack, it will be Ethan de Groot, Cody Taylor and Tyrell Lomax once again as the All Blacks front row. I think scrums are going to be a massively important part of this test match. Nick Berry has been announced as the referee in charge. I'm curious to see what way the scrum momentum does end up going. In the locking duo, no changes for the AB. Scott Barrett as the 4 and Patrick Tuipulotu. He is the Blues captain throughout Super Rugby Pacific, so a home field advantage for that man alongside a few other Blues. In the side, in the loose forward trio, it is Sama Penifenau, Dalton Papali'i and Ardie Savia. Now, people were talking about last week the All Blacks line-out not quite functioning. They were worried by bringing in a Blackadder or a Jacobson. Perhaps the All Blacks lose a little bit of that height at line-out time. But Sama Penifenau made 9 tackles last week, had a couple decent runs. I just want to see that little bit more from him, matching what Chandler Cunningham South was able to do for the English. Ardie Savia at number 8 going to be massively important, and Dalton Papali'i made the most tackles out of any All Black for that first match. With 15 in the back line, like I mentioned, Finlay Christie comes into the starting lineup. That is due to that knee injury that TJ did suffer. Now, it doesn't look like he's going to be out for a long period of time, but he is going to be out for this game, which actually does bring a debut off the bench for Cortez Ratama at 10. Damien McKenzie off the kicking tee. He wasn't the best last week, but I think that may have just been a little bit of a confidence thing. If he gets another game under his belt as the fly half, perhaps this week will go a lot more smoothly. And of course, New Zealand now incorporating timers onto their scoreboards, so McKenzie will know exactly when he's got 10 seconds and exactly when he's got no seconds left when he does take on the kick. Mark Talia, he is out on the left wing, had some great runs, chasing the kicks, going to be extremely important for that man throughout this game. Geordie Barrett and Rieko Ioane, they've gone with the experience in the midfield rather than bringing in someone like a Proctor at 13. I think that this is one of those matches that Ioane has to have a massive one, or else people will be doubting him in that number 13 jersey. Some already are, but he needs a big game, something to show people that he is still that same try-scoring machine that the All Blacks had a few years ago. Sevu Reece out on the right wing. Speaking of tries scored, he managed to get himself one last week up against England off a cross kick of Damien McKenzie. And then at number 15 to close out the starting lineup for the All Blacks, it is Stephen Perofeta. Started the last match, had a clean break and a try assist, so a great performance from that man overall. But for the English, they have made very minimal changes, just like the ABs. In fact, they've only made the one, and that is in that number 1 jersey. Joe Marler, he did suffer an injury last week, so that brings in Finn Baxter, who actually made his way off the bench in the last performance. And to be fair, for a very young player, he looked relatively solid out there on the field, as if he already had a few caps under his belt already. Definitely had more minutes than he would have first been anticipating, but he's got a lot of minutes ahead of him here. Hopefully he does have a solid game. Number 2, Jamie George, and also Will Stewart there as the number 3. George was a tackling machine. I believe he was one of the about 5 English players who made more than 15 tackles throughout the contest. I think he had 19 throughout that last game. In the locking duo, Maro Itoje at number 4 and George Martin at number 5. The key to success for the All Blacks in this game is to not allow Maro Itoje to do what he did in test match number 1. That man was clinical in the breakdown. I believe he got about 3 turnovers for the English at line-out time. He was impeccable, getting a couple line-out steals. The more that the All Blacks can avoid that man, the better off they will be in the second test match. And it's the opposite for the English game plan of wanting to get a victory. They have to get Maro Itoje involved, and if he is able to do so, we'll keep this game very close in the loose forward trio. Chandler Cunning himself at number 6, number 7 Sam Underhill, and number 8 Ben Earl. I don't think this loose forward trio could have done much more than they did in the last week's game. They were absolutely phenomenal. Chandler Cunning himself looking like he's always been in that number 6 jersey for the English, having running meters, getting in the breakdowns, looking very strong. Sam Underhill also getting a couple crucial steals. And Ben Earl, what more can you say? In the last 12 months, that man has had more minutes than any other international player. It was a stat that I saw. Actually, him and Maro Itoje are leading the charge, and Ben Earl throughout that time has had the most carries and also has made the most tackles. So he's a workhorse through and through. His game last week was impeccable. 24 carries for him, also making a lot of tackles along the way. He'll want a big game up against the All Blacks in the second test. Looking through at the backline now though. Alex Mitchell and Marcus Smith will once again be that 9-10 combination. Smith doing very well at going into that fly half role, but then also hanging back when the All Blacks were going for those box kicks, creating the counter-attack, and him and George Furbank were working very well together. Tommy Freeman out on the left wing. I'll be honest, out of the whole English side, you could almost make an argument that he had the worst game, but it wasn't even that bad. Like, he dropped the ball once or twice, I believe. Still had a couple decent runs, but if you had to pick someone who probably needs a big game here, it would be Tommy Freeman. In the midfield combination, a man who had a massive performance, Ollie Lawrence. He is there at number 12. He did make 19 tackles throughout that last game, was shutting down the All Blacks midfield, forcing the ABs to go with wide cutout passes to try and avoid that man. And he is a very physical individual, proving that throughout the 80 minutes. On the outside, Henry Slade. Number 14, Emmanuel Fiwaboso. Great performance from him for the first time seeing him on New Zealand soil. And number 15, once again, they have gone with George Furbank. Right, so a little bit of an update. Freddie Stewart is actually going to be starting at number 15 for this contest. He is a late injury replacement for George Furbank, so that information that I just said about Furbank being in the side is incorrect. They recently announced it, so I thought I'd better let you guys know. Freddie Stewart starting rather than Furbank for the second test match. So those are the starting lineups for these two sides. Only two changes. Finn Baxter in, Finlay Christie in, both getting minutes last week, now getting the start at Eden Park. It's going to be an epic one between these two sides. And I mentioned about it, the All Blacks. They have got a prestigious record at Eden Park. The last 48 test matches, the All Blacks have won 46. They have drawn 2. And the last time they lost at Eden Park was 1994 up against the French when they were defeated 23 points to 20. Now, 1994, that was 30 years ago. I was not walking. Well, I wasn't even crawling 30 years ago. I wasn't born, so I couldn't really crawl. But that's a long time. And that's a big record to have to try and keep intact for a side that only won by 1 point down in Dunedin. So I know that the All Blacks will try and take that out of their mind, but at the same time, that will be the motivating factor for England to be the first side to beat the All Blacks in 30 years at Eden Park. Now, New Zealand last week, they increased their winning streak up against the English by an extra 1. Believe that brings it up to 8 or 9 now in a row. Their last 2 games up against them in Dunedin, they have only won by 1 point. This game at Eden Park, it is known as a fortress for the All Blacks, and they will want to defend it. This one is an extremely tough game to give a score prediction for. I do think the All Blacks will definitely improve from what we saw last week. We've got to remember England had that warm-up game up against the Japanese. The All Blacks, that was their first game together of 2024. England also playing in the Six Nations this year. All Blacks individually playing in different teams throughout Super Rugby Pacific. So I am still going to say that the All Blacks win this game. I'm going to say that they win it 24 points to 16. I think it will be just a little bit higher scoring than we saw the last time these two sides played. I think the All Blacks will try and back themselves to play quite a quick game. Some people questioning if Finlay Christie is able to do that though from that 9 jersey, so I know a lot of eyes are going to be on him, the Blues halfback. They have got Cortez Ratima off the bench, as well as Beauden Barrett and Anton Leonard-Brown in the backs. And I feel like all 3 of those individuals can add something special for the All Blacks later on in the contest. Now off the English bench, it was interesting last week because they didn't really know when to use Tom Curry, because all three of the men in the starting lineup were that strong that it was going to be very hard to take one of them off. And I feel like they may have that situation again, definitely if they can match what they did last week. And like I said, they had a phenomenal performance. Same with Maro Itoje, same with Ollie Lawrence. There are plenty of English names that you could put in the hat for an important factor in this contest. And the same can be said about the All Blacks. But nonetheless, I do thank you all very much for tuning into this preview. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. The game is taking place at 7:05 p.m. on Saturday night here in New Zealand. It's going to be an absolutely awesome game. The second and final test match between these two sides of the series. New Zealand, of course, heading to the USA next week to take on the Flying Fijians. But nonetheless, I do thank you all very much for tuning in. Do let me know your score prediction in the comments down below, as well as who you think will be the key players throughout this matchup. Also, we are going to be doing the live commentary on the channel with an hour-long build-up so that we can look through the players, the stats, and everything to do with this English versus All Blacks game. But thank you all very much for tuning in, and I will see you all for the next one.